Welcome to our ongoing kind of bi-weekly online educational luncheon and brown bag hosted by the Nevada chapter of the American Planning Association, and specifically the northern section of the Nevada chapter of the American Planning Association. My name is Frederick Steinman. I'm the current director of the northern section of the Nevada chapter of the American Planning Association, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to, again, this ongoing series of online educational brown bags. Before I introduce today's speaker and topic, I just wanted to make a couple quick announcements. First and foremost, this session is being recorded, and once completed, this session will be uploaded to the chapter's YouTube page. All you need to do is search on YouTube for APA Nevada, and hopefully we'll have this session loaded within a week or so. The recorded session and rendered session for May 27, 2020 that I presented on regarding the impact of COVID-19 on Nevada's fiscal system will be published on the chapter's YouTube channel later today. Should be available and done by about 5 p.m. So again, if you're interested in rewatching the May 27th online educational brown bag on the impacts of COVID-19 on the state's fiscal system, that'll be available on the chapter's YouTube page later today. As an additional announcement, the Nevada chapter of the American Planning Association and the Executive Committee continues on the development of the annual conference of the Nevada chapter of the American Planning Association, which will of course be held in October later this year. Members of the Executive Committee are still working with key stakeholders to figure out what format will work and whether or not we'll be using an online format. We hope to have information to all the chapter members, as well as anyone interested in attending and participating in this year's annual conference within the next month or so. Also, as one additional announcement, we will have another Nevada APA Northern Section online educational brown bag in 2 weeks on Wednesday, June 24th from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. And of course, I'll send you all the details in the coming days and week. That presentation will be done by representatives from the RTC of Washoe County and the Reno Tahoe International Airport Authority, discussing the impacts of COVID-19 on those organizations, but also what those organizations are doing to ensure that transportation in and around the region is as safe as possible given the impacts of COVID-19. So please mark your calendars, June 24th from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Again, that'll be a presentation, a joint presentation between the RTC and the Reno Tahoe International Airport Authority. After that, in July, we are expecting a presentation from the Washoe County Health Department and what Washoe County's Health Department is doing in response to COVID-19 and preparing as we continue to reopen the Northern Nevada economy, as well as move into the fall months as well. After that, hopefully sometime in late July or potentially into early August, we'll be doing a roundtable discussion after we have essentially moved through all these presentations on the impacts of COVID-19 in the world of planning. And that roundtable discussion will be developed hopefully within the next couple weeks, and then additional information will be sent to each of you and to the entire chapter as soon as those details are available. With that in mind, I want to give as much time as possible to our keynote presenter and speaker today. Dr. Thomas Harris is a professor, state specialist, and director of the University Center for Economic Development. He has a multilateral appointment between the College of Agriculture, Biotechnology, Natural Resources, University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, and the College of Business at the University of Nevada, Reno. And Dr. Harris was kind enough to put this presentation together and speak to us today regarding what resiliency and economic resiliency looks like in a COVID and post-COVID-19 era. Again, please keep your microphones muted, and as soon as Dr. Harris is done with his presentations, we'll then open it up to questions and answers. So without further ado, Dr. Harris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fred. Yeah, I'm funded. I'm like a NASCAR. I'm funded by 4 or 5 different areas. This presentation, let me get it going here. This is old dog learning new tricks. Here we go. I think this is a lot of people have been hearing about what is resiliency. In fact, like I was telling Fred, I run heading up the University Center for Economic Development, and we're getting some funding to look at resiliency and how to apply it to the state of Nevada and its rural areas as well as urban areas. It's one of these things that people talk about a lot. Just what is it? That's what we want to get into. I think the main thing about this COVID thing, when two people made statements I think were very good. One by Peggy Noonan, who used to be the speechwriter for George Herbert Walker Bush. And that says that, everybody says we're in the same boat, but really we're not in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, different sized boats, different areas. New York City's big versus little Humboldt County or Esmeralda. All of us are in different types of boats, and how we impact this is really need to be looking individual. And Mark Cuban, I come from Texas, most of you can understand the way I talk, and I'm from the Dallas area, and he's the owner of the Mavericks. And
I know.
We're both alive.
Uh-oh, Fred. Did we get, anyway, Mark Cuban says economic recovery could be brutal, and I think he's very true about what's going on recovery, because we'll talk about that what's going on. People can only be 50% capacity. You got to have all kinds of restaurants have all these other restrictions on them, which looks like it's reducing revenue and increasing costs. So those are going to be areas that we're going to be addressing later. I thought I'd start out just talking about what's happened. Most of us has been reading about the labor market. In April, we had these really when it started reporting. Pardon me. And some people are reporting that this may be an undercount because not everybody reported in. And we had a decrease in employment in 1 month of about 244,000 jobs. And if you look from April 2019, 2020, we lost 254,000. I want to say how you can relate to that. Well, one of the teams that we play, Boise State, the city of Boise has a population of 228,000. We lost in 1 month the city of Boise. So that's a lot of people in one smack to get hit. And like I said, Nevada has seen losses in employment. We've seen losses like 242,000 people in the service industry, which is face-to-face. This is what this COVID looks like. However, there was 600 new employees in the goods-producing industry. So what's happening, we'll talk about this, it's differential how this impact has been doing. And it's differential throughout the U.S. also. But as you've been reading, and I hope that you can read this, it's probably pretty hard, that we've led the state. We were 28% unemployment. We're the highest in the U.S. The U.S. unemployment is around 14%, so that's how higher. Michigan is second to us, about 22%. In 1 month, this is what has happened so quickly, and I think it's so unusual. In March, we had an unemployment rate of 6.9%. And in April 2010, we had an unemployment rate of 4%. So in a year, we've gone from 4 to 28%. But one thing to remember, if you look deeply in some of this Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation statistics and history, January, February of 2020, Nevada recorded its lowest ever recorded unemployment rate of 3.6%. In 2 months, we've gone from the lowest ever to the highest ever. And so that's why we're seeing so much dislocation going on, I think, with the economy, and hopefully we will be bouncing back. The Nevada gaming, I remember they came up with some statistics, and a lot of us here are local governments and state government. I was at the university. We were interested in how the revenues. They saw a 99.6% decrease from April 2019 to 2020 in revenues. Now, I know Fred gave a presentation last month on fiscal issues. Again, this is adding to it. And so and Governor Sisolak has also put out, we're going to reduce, I think it's about 500 million, we're in the hole or something. What's going to be happening now, there's going to be some changes, and we're getting things, we're going to change at university as well as you see at other places. So with all this, people going, all of a sudden resiliency is getting the buzzword. What is it? Basically, in an economic system, you have two shocks to a shock. You absorb it, that's change is in the economy when the shock persists. Now, right now, like we gone from 2% to 28%, that's the big shock. But then how do we rebound? Rebound to changes in the economy, how the economy recovers. And so this is what resiliency talks about. Taking that shock, how long we take it, and then as we how do we come back? And this is how the people have been studying about resiliency, and you see a lot of people talk about it. Resiliency is basically this. You have the recessionary shock. In this case, is I always think about my friend Bob Potts calls this more of a, it wasn't a monetary change. It was administrative closure because of COVID, which we had to do. We had this shock, and then all of a sudden we have a drop right here. Now, this is the recession duration. How long will that be? Now, we're going to look back at previous recessions and kind of speculate on what's with the Reno SMSA. But also, this is what started. And then our recovery is the rebound. Now, this right here is just not, here's the employment. Now, the employment, this right here by resiliency is not returning to the employment that was previous, but what is expected is that's going to keep on growing at its good time rate. Then you go back to that. That's what resiliency. Some people may say, well, you come back at, well, you're not back at the levels you were before, but not even levels, but the growth rate, those levels. That's what resiliency talks about. And you got time period T0, T1 to T2 is when you have the drop, and T2 to T3. And there's been two articles written that looks at resiliency, comparing them, and I'll talk a little bit about them, comparing rural to urban and different sectors, and what does it mean, and what does it might mean for our economic development strategies here. What's the drop? The drop is really from what you have here down to here. This is what you're talking about here, is that Y2 right here is what you expect it to be, and then what happened. And so, pardon me, what happened is that you're measuring this drop. And so if we look at, in different counties, we'll have different variables. So if there was no drop, the drop would be 0, but it can go as high as very high as whatever your drop could be. So that's the drop we calculate. But then you calculate how it responds. And the shock is how it responds. And we'll talk about this, but there may be a new economic structure you got. Do you grow back to the state of growth? Now, this is what we need to discuss when we do these analysis with resiliency. What exactly growth rate you want to be becoming? And so what we have here is this right here is YT. What you're doing here is going from this period up to this period where you're having the growth rate, but also the time, because the length of the time is very important. I might argue with some of my comments, may want to look at this too, T1 to T2, how quick the depression, how come the drop was, especially with us, so rapid. But here is the rebound. It's not only this rebound, but how long it took. And so what happens here, if you can calculate, what we do, we calculate. So if the region fails to escape the bottom, the rebound is 0. Okay, if it does, then the rebound is 1, but it also depends on this length. The region might, what happens, like we're saying, the bounce back, that's what we're looking at. And if I was thinking what we're looking at now with this COVID-19, we're looking at what kind of bounce back, or how can we aid in this bounce back. And one of the things, this was analysis done by Stefan Getz at Penn State. I hope to have him out here next fall or spring if we had COVID mediates anyway. He gives us a talk, but he's done some things. We looked at different counties and this kind of rating it. But if you have a good goods and producing record, it's really based if you got good financial policy and you got discretionary monies and you have inventories, maybe that'll help you bounce back and sometimes implement tax cuts. If I was looking at what we're having in the Great Recession, well, the Great Recession, when we bounced up, we brought in new firms like Tesla and all those with that. All of a sudden, we had an avenue to change our economy. That's what happened and brought us back. Hopefully, what happened is that for us to bounce back is that this has been what sectors got impacted, and they were the service sectors. which are kind of a person to person. Anything was person to person. If you saw, we had losses in goods and service producing, but not in goods producing. So how fast that changes. And that might be very lengthy because of COVID, worry about COVID. If we get a spike up and all that, that's what's really the worry about it. So those sectors that, you know, in Washoe County, we kind of been, and I'm going to call the Reno Sparks, Story County, SMSA, we have trick out there, and we kind of been developing more of high tech, kind of diversifying, which is person to machine, which may not be impacted as much with this COVID. Measuring resiliency, what goes on is this. This is very busy, but I'll tell you what is going on here. Basically, you can, if you take our time period, and we take for state of Nevada, and there's what Stefan did for the U.S. Out of the Great Recession, he got every county. He got every county and was able to figure out how the bounce was, how it went down, and then how it went up. So he has every county that way. And from every county, he was able to get this type of ratio. He got how much the rebound was minus the minimum, who had the lowest rebound. So you got, you know, if you were rebounding the most, you got big. Now, this S number, you see this S is like 0.001. Why it does that, all of y'all remember, you can't take the log of 0. If this was the same, you get, so what you do, you add this little thing in case you get this, when you get the minimum, you add that, and therefore you can calculate something. Divided by the drop minus the one that had the lowest drop. And so what you're getting is a ratio of all counties compared to, I won't call this, if some of you had doing basic economic sectors, there's location quotients, there's something called the minimum requirements. Kind of like minimum requirement. This is the minimums. And so what we're seeing here is rating. So if you, the ratio gave us that ratio for every county. And then kind of like doing Z-scores, the resiliency is the ratio, what you had for that sector, minus the average of all the counties in the US divided by the standard deviation. And by doing that, we're able to get a resiliency quotient. And what we hope to do, what we're going to be doing is deriving those things, and you know, exactly what does it mean? How much resiliency that's the big question. How much resiliency do you need? How much resiliency, what does it mean to it? I will tell you, let me back here. I will tell you on some of the previous studies I've seen, one done at Idaho, he did this and found that small ag sectors were very resilient. Well, they're small and ag can turn around. He found that sometimes some manufacturing weren't as resilient. There's a concept in economics called putty clay with manufacturing. If you think about it, when President Trump wanted GM to make ventilators, it took them a while to retool and change. Those durable manufacturers are like a 18-wheeler making a left turn. They take a little time. And other like non-durables who can change their production practices very quickly. And so resiliency may depend on the structure of your economy. And then therefore, you know, that would say why things are impacting so much. Our drop, quite frankly, is because we have a lot of our sector is in gaming and retail. That's person to person. And all of that got changed. And so that's why that thing dropped so much. And so how we resiliency, we need to work, and this is something Fred's working, we're going to work with some funds from EDA, developing programs to help businesses who have person to person, how they can be more efficient when we try to come out of this COVID-19. Now, here's some economic theories about this. COVID, I just went through quickly about how you measure the thing, but this one here, what we're talking about is the different theories. And of course, probably the old Milton Friedman was one of the first came up with this in the 80s. It's called the plucking model. Now the plucking model, and we're not talking about chickens here, the plucking model is something that was developed to look at the nation. And the nation is that you go through, you have something going on. It could be a disaster, natural requirement. All of a sudden you go back down. But what happens, the nation has all materials, people, resources that what he would say would go down and then it'll go back up. And this is what they call the plucking model, that what happens is the resiliency of the nation is figuring out how far you go back down, but then how fast you go back up to this original growth line. And if it's this the growth line you want. So the plucking model works pretty good here to now. This is what I think people call the V that people are looking at. This is the kind of the V recovery some people are looking, that all of a sudden it's called a plucking model because Milton Friedman had a rubber band on his wrist. He's like, you stretch that and it snaps back. So that's what the plucking model is about. However, there was another fellow that had done some stuff on written, kind of looked further. This guy named Martin, which I'll have some resources in the back. He got more in talking about how regions, because the nation is a different animal. The national has all the employment, all the resources, deficit spending. National response is going to be different. But regions or state, even within the state, we have different regions. We have different economies, and they're different than the plucking model. We have different things. Everybody has different resources, and those things can happen. And basically what happened is this. This is his flat economy. This is something concerned. This is what we're all working about. In this case, you come up and you have a disaster. Well, you have the COVID. And all of a sudden, your economy goes down. Boom. Hopefully, what we want here in Nevada, hopefully, is at least that you bounce right back up to the long run base right here, what that would take. And so basically it's kind of understanding what went down in the sectors, but then hopefully what we can do is what we go back happens in the nation. It may not happen to us here. It's just what we have to say, what happens. You could have down, but a new long-term growth rate. In other words, our growth rate, I'll show you some stuff. We had those good years in 2001 to 2000 before the Great Recession. Man, those, when we were growing, if we were growing at that rate, but maybe that's a rate that's one that could be up here, but maybe there's a new growth rate we're looking at. We have that, then we can come down and look at this and see what we need to do that growth rate. Basically, this happens if the primary sectors decline and many of the other sectors increase. Now you think about what we've done when we had the decrease in the housing and gaming. We were really impacted. Well, in the Reno Sparks area and in Clark and much of us, we have tried to diversify, and by diversifying, we are in. I don't say it's low here or not, but like we have Trick, we have Tesla, we have Panasonic, we have all these other sectors. We may be down at a new growth rate here, still growing. We went down and we're like here. But in the secondary sectors, manufacturing has always been very low, and now it's increasing in other sectors. We're looking at those other sectors to come and be part of our economy. Maybe that's it. And it may be here or maybe in another area. Here's what we're worried about. Not worried about it's negative growth. You can have it. All of us have seen it. We've seen mines close, a place called Bodie, California. Went away. That can happen. And what we need to be aware is a loss of resources to assist new economic development alternatives. That can happen. That can be, and this is where I'm worried a little bit about the public funds, local, state, and government have to do balanced budgets. And if we have resources like that taken away from us, it may impede our abilities to go on these new longer. We could be in this kind of deal where you're going down. And it's a lack of infrastructure, broadband in many of our rural areas. One of my things I always talk about is my time I was in Ely one time talking to the Ely mayor, and she said, "Tom, we can't keep guards in the state prison because they can't game." I went, "Well, there's a Nevada club. They can go play 21. I said, "No, Tom, they can't download the Netflix." That shows you how old I am. Not only do you need broadband and even 5G, because like I said, I used to be in the College of Ag. I know in Iowa State, they're now developing autonomous tractors. You need 5G for that. Some of our farming in rural Nevada may have to use drones. You need 5G. If you don't have that, you're not going to be in that economy. So that's what this thing is talking about. We need infrastructure, and this can help us, but you can, and we've seen areas go down. Even though you may want to do that, unfortunately, the United States may pluck back up. This can happen, and we need to be aware of it. There's some areas that we need to address. Now, Martin also talked about the rural transformation. I do a lot with rural economics, but this is also applicable to urban. Here's a long word, but here's what would be great. With tests and laws, all of a sudden, boom, we're in a new, and we're at even a higher rate. That can happen too. And a higher, it may have a loss of industry, may opportunities. I look at when we had our decrease in the Great Recession, we still are big in gaming, but gaming has lost and gone down a lot, compared, because everybody become more competitive. However, there's Tesla, there's Trick, which has Tesla and Panasonic. Then you go out to Humboldt County, they have, in Esmeralda County, they have mineral deposits of lithium. All of a sudden, it's kind of like, okay, do we make a big cluster of this for development? That might be something we want to look at. We have been mining, they're going to mine lithium. Hopefully they don't, we've been sending it over to China and make the cathode. Hey, let's be, I'm all for free trade, but I'm also for strategic trade. Gosh, if we could mine that lithium, make the cathodes, be part of the electric cars, boy, there you are. You may be up here. And just remember, when one of the main things that are going on in the economy is clean energy. Now, what happens with clean energy is this. Solar, we have nighttime. No energy there. Wind, sometimes we have calm days. No energy generated then. And then also you have things developed by water. Well, if you have a drought, you don't have it then. So what you need batteries. And batteries are going to be bigger and bigger. And so this is an area I hope we look at economic development that might bring us even to a higher economic development. This is where old industries are being old, but we bring in new industries and they may become, the new ones. We also are seeing changes in the economy. Uber is kind of, you think about it, Uber's had a little trouble, but Uber, you think about it. If Reno Taxi wanted to expand its taxi cab service, it'd have to go buy a new fleet of trucks, new fleet of cars. Uber, only thing Uber does is just adds a person to their computer program. This is what we call the new economy, which is a intangible economy. And that has been more and more. And so adopting these new economies, new sectors, yeah, we could be it, but we could be up here also. That would be great. Now, I just did a plucking model. Okay, what I did, this is the GDP for the Reno Sparks SMSA, which is Reno Sparks is Washoe County and Story. The plucking model would say, here's our growth from 2000, I think what I had from 2001 to 2006, we had the big growth going on, and then the recession hit. If we stayed at that level and grew this as a trend line, would be way up here. We're right down here now. But is this a level? This is what we're going to be talking about, resiliency. Is this a level we want? Is this a level that's going to be done differently? And so basically what we need to be looking at is there was an injury from us from the Great Recession would hurt us, but the resiliency people would say you need to you came back up your GDP. I use GDP. Employment, you can use employment also. I'll be using employment. But production is employment and capital. And so you can get kind of incorrect kind of what's important with the industries, because like agriculture doesn't employ a lot of people, but they have a lot of capital and they produce a lot of output. Same with manufacturing. So this is one thing of the plucking model would be saying we're a little below what, but maybe we want to, this is not sustainable growth rate we want. Maybe we want the national growth rate. That's what happens with this resiliency. It looks like what you're doing is that you're kind of figuring out what growth rates you want and figuring out what that could be on that. Now, my expertise was not good in Excel. I could do this, the one I showed with the great decrease. using from here to 2010, if I get that trend, it'd go down like this. This would be what Martin would say it'd be down. Alternatively, I could be up here with this, and with this trend, draw one up here. This would be starting at our new low level, which happened coming out of the recession. If we maintain that trend, that upper trend here, I could draw that, and that could be another one to look at. I think this is something that Fred and I and Silva's going to have to figure out how we're going to figure out this growth rate stuff and get some information on growth on those areas. Okay. What I decided to do is this. This is kind of an analysis of the different areas. What I'm trying to do now is look at this: the growth, the decline, and the regrowth. And I'm doing it using employment data. Now I'm using some data. This is a data source. Now I have it by Gary Smith. He's an emeritus professor at Washington State. And it's a lot of BEA data, and I like to use BEA data. And it kind of shows you what was going on in the early time. Now this, from 2001 to 2006, I want to call this the good times. This is when everything was growing. 2000, Reno SMSA had almost 45,000 more jobs and about 18% growth right here. And if we were looking at the plucking model per se, we would want to draw this all the way up here like this. And this is compared with GDP, and then figure how that gets closer there. But what were the industries? What industries did this? And one of the things I like to look at is things called shift share. Shift share looks at growth from one period to the other. This is 2001 to 2006. Here's your actual growth rate. We grew at 18%. This is from 2001 all the way. We started at 2001, by the way, because that's when NAICS came in. We had these SICs before, but this is why we're doing 2001. Yes. This is our growth. But growth is made up of three things. National growth, if we all just grew, we got on the coattails of the nation and we grew like the nation. And also, it could be an industrial mix. Were we in the right, if instead of farming, we were in computers nationally, computers were growing while farming was staying still or going down, maybe we were just in the right mix. And then what else is the regional shift. What did we end up doing? So you see in this time period, the national mix, we grew at 8%. This is this green line. Industry mix, we grew at about 2%, but the regional shift, 8. We were, in that time period, we had a lot of construction, a lot of other things going on that we were growing. We had a very good regional shift. Now, it did kind of wane a little bit in the later time periods where we were below the nation, but it kind of tells us that we were growing. We had some local competitive advantages. Figuring out what those advantages are is the key for you. That's why it was growing. We may want to grow back again, figure out what did that. Now, this is the shift components. Now, location quotients. Now, location quotient is another thing. It shows it's the percentage of, let's say, of a sector in Washoe County. Let's say the percentage of agriculture in total Washoe County employment divided by the percentage of agriculture in U.S. to U.S. employment. So you get the relative shares. If you have a great number greater than 1, you are more specialized, and that's what people are saying. So in this case, no surprise, arts and accommodations. Now, it is something down here, it'd be construction. What happens with some of our employment data, we have disclosure problems, and that's always happens in areas. And something like construction may be a disclosure problem that they didn't want to give out, and you can figure out which one was that. Even manufacturing here still. But you see here, the national growth rate, we grew at 20,000, we had 4,000, 19,000. So in essence, what we had here, the growth rate of administrative and waste had a very big growth rate, had a competitive advantage there. Had a little negative with arts, had a little negative, well, accommodations. What happens there is, as it become, our casinos are very competitive, but as we know, there's California others. This is something that's happened to a lot of us here. But manufacturing, this is what we've been doing. Manufacturing had a very 21% of the shift was to manufacturing. So manufacturing added a lot to our growth rate, which, you know, if you where in other states, manufacturing is, in Michigan, manufacturing is very large. As you become, as us, as we were very low and all of a sudden we're growing, this was one of the two major things that happened. Also, management of companies is kind of a new thing. And if you think about Luther Mack, who owns a lot of, that's what I do for an example, the people who work at McDonald's are in the restaurant business. Mr. Mack owns a lot of these McDonald's. That's a management corporation. So that's the management part. It's different from this. So the management of companies and enterprises are becoming a bigger part of the economy. But that's when the good times. Now let's see what happened in the bad times. This is the bad time. This is in the Great Recession where it hit. And I went from 2007 to 2011. Looks like we came back out of it. And at 2011 here, what it says is that the decline we lost 31,000 jobs, or about 10%. We lost 10%. Okay. What exactly were those economies? What were those sectors? Well, this is the growth rate. The growth rate, growth rate here, our regional mix was a negative. National growth, if we were only on the coattails of the nation, we should only have dropped 2%, but we dropped an extra 8%. So it was construction that really happened because of the finance and some of that. And so the actual growth rate, you see, was going up. This is how it went down, and then it started coming back up after 2010. And the industry mix, about zero, not really didn't make much, but our regional shift, really, we had some impacts of our regional shift. What was that? It's these sectors. These sectors had the biggest net decreases. Construction. We lost about 50% of our employment now in this time period, and that really hurt us. It's really related to the finance. Housing, we had engineers, architects impacted, a whole lot of people impacted, and manufacturing was impacted a lot, as to the nation. Accommodations were impacted, as well as this right here. So as you see, we had some decreases, and a lot of decreases. Farming has been very small. It's kind of a crazy number for Reno Sparks, but anyway, we decreased, but you can see the major was the regional shift. And that's when we started changing. We had GOED, and all of a sudden we kind of wanted to diversify into other areas. And so our increases come like this. This is our increase. We come out of 2011 out here. Have we gone back to areas bigger? The research shows between 2011 and 2018, the Reno Spark SMSA grew at 60,000 people and 24%. From this big decrease, we've grown a lot. Now, we do not have the data yet for 2020. We do have some other things we can figure out and do some estimations. But BEA and Bureau of Labor Statistics, those data take time, but they're showing dramatic decreases as we've seen hospitality. But I will tell you, as the casinos open, that employment went back up. Now, I don't think it went back up to its full point yet, but those are areas that we need to be looking at. Now, here's the growth. The growth was very slow and all of a sudden just took off, in which we grew at that time, February 2011-18, about 24%. That's pretty good from a decrease of 10. And if we grew at the national rate of 14%, the nation grew very big. The regional shift was 8%, and the industry mix was kind of like 2%. Here's the increase. We started gaining our regional competitiveship back. Now, this is what we're talking about. We need to figure out why we did that. How come? And it may be because of manufacturing and others, and also allowing other sectors to come in small business. This is areas that we need to be aware of with this resiliency. Here are the sectors. And like I say, like construction in 2011 was not, but all of a sudden construction increased. Now it's a basic sector. It increased about 6,000, percentage shift, about 55%, tremendous increase. Manufacturing, 11,000. Now this is, manufacturing has some capital. Now manufacturing, the capital in manufacturing, the employment but the employment is increasing. But you got to remember, if we did GDP here, the manufacturing may have a bigger increase because they use more capital in their formation. But that has been one of our leading. And this is an area that we may want to look at expanding here. Transportation and warehouse, well, increase. Again, arts and entertainment, and unfortunately, they're kind of maintaining themselves, which I suspect. And they're been very smart at kind of coordinate themselves with skiing and other things where they're working together. And so what we have here is that we have some more sectors that become basic sectors: construction, manufacturing, transportation, arts, accommodation, still very big. And they've been added to our growth. Well, maybe we want to look at that also, small business. Now, when I did this just to give people some idea, the Reno Sparks SMSA is made up of Reno and, Washoe County and Story County. And people have often asked me, why do we have Story County as an SMSA? It's because of transportation. People work. And SMSA is taking consideration not only where people are, but where people work, because you get two different sets of data. You get the place of work data, and you get the place of residence data. So we always have to be aware of that so we can make some allocations. Whenever we do county personal income or county unemployment, we want the number of people living in the county who are unemployed. And so what we have to do is do something called resident adjustment. And resident adjustment means if somebody works in Washoe County and lives in Washoe and works in Story, you want to bring those people in. But if somebody from Story works in Washoe but lives in Story, you want to take those people out. So you get this, what we call percent to people, this residents. Look what's happened. You can see when Trick and Tesla took off right here. Unprecedented. This happens to Eureka and Elko also. Basically what this shows, that you get a net adjustment of minus 409%, reflecting the outflow of earnings owing to overall net effect of workers commuting to Story County in 2018. So about this amount equates to 409% of Story County's total personal income. Those earnings accrue to workers who held jobs within Story but resided outside. There's that linkage. Story is linked to Washoe. A lot of people live in Washoe County. You got to have that linkage, and that's why it is part of the SMSA. Put another way, for every $100 of personal income reported for Story County residents in 2018, an additional $409 of earned income reported elsewhere from jobs held by people outside the county. And that is why we do regions, because the job flow we're trying to capture, and from that we get the true earnings where people work. What I will say here is that the activities in Story County impact the other economic sectors in Washoe County, as to services and retail and entrepreneurship and that, because of Tesla and all the things that's going on in Trick, as well as Pershing and these other counties also. Here's my references. These are the people of the plucking model. Milton Friedman, Stefan Getz wrote an interesting paper where this is where we're going to have to do the recalculations, what he did looking at it. He found that in many cases that very small populated rural places, well, that's because they're small. They can pivot real quick, or much better than some rural places that are heavy manufacturing. Well, manufacturing, you got more people, it's hard to pivot. This R. Martin is this article where he looked at the differences between regional and urban, national. Milton Friedman is a national model. Martin I think, gives you an idea of what could happen in regions given your different resource allocations and all that. Ringwood and Phil Watson in Idaho, this is what they did. They did some studies on the Great Recession, how it's impacted, how the counties. Again, they was mainly focused on rural. Again, the same thing in rural areas. If they had a lot of farming, small population, they can flip. Now, and then Gary Smith, this is where the project, those numbers I was showing you, that's where it came from. So what we talk about resiliency is really the comeback, how it means. And so what we need to be doing, looking at, is looking what's going on before and figuring out how we, with Martin, how we can get it back into the growth model, but even into different industries. That's what we're talking about, that give us even a higher growth rate. That's what we'd like to do. So resiliency, it's also how much resilience. A guy named Roger Capel in Wyoming, if you have a lot of resiliency, are you less likely to take on new businesses like Tesla? If you have low resiliency and you're going in the dumps like we were into, who's going to turn out the lights in Washoe County in the early 2000s, we were able to take Tesla. All of a sudden, boom, there you go. So sometimes it's a very tricky thing, but just remember what we're doing is looking at the down, how you go down, and how you go back up, and figuring out those areas. And I would say it has to be, it's also why I've seen these studies, what's good enough for the nation may not be good enough for Nevada. Nevada has different resources, different allocations. What's good enough for Clark County may not work in Esmeralda County, different resources and different situations. It's situation specific. It's situation of what sectors are being impacted and how they react to those impacts of COVID-19. And so any more questions, I'd be glad to. And I do want to thank y'all for allowing me to talk about this, but also allowing me to bring out some stuff we've done, resiliency, and how, like I said, we're getting this extra funds from EDA to look at how we can apply resiliency in Nevada. And Fred and I would like your opinions or suggestions too while we're doing this. It's kind of a new new area of regional development. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much, Tom. We do have some time for questions and answers.
You want me to get off the stop share?
Stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
If you want, you can either text or chat in your question or just jump in. Let us know if you have a question.
Sounds like my class.
Hi, Tom. This is Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
I couldn't be quiet too long. A couple of things. What about the whole concept of secular stagnation, I think it's called, or hysteresis? I mean, there's been work out there that shows just how long, some of these severely hit areas out of the last recession have taken or been impacted by the Great Recession. The other thing is, too, I'm sympathetic to the fact that NAICS came in 2001. But if you look at the data from 2001 to 2006, Washoe County's employment roughly grew by 35,000. And construction employment was like a third of that, or almost a third of that, at 9,000. So a lot of what you're calling good times was the construction bubble. It wasn't necessarily driven by demand. Okay. So I guess there's two questions. I mean, do you think that the good times were really that good, or was there something else underlying the economy that drove that bubble, both locally and statewide, and because not every state was impacted equally? And two, with this idea of longer term stagnation. What do you think of that idea?
Okay, long-term stagnation. What you're talking about is sometimes you get in areas that don't change. If you remember, I think a lot that I'd say in the state of Nevada, when gaming started, there was always an idea that we'd be able to outcompete them. But as we changed, and as we changed, we got into new industries. People in Michigan have the automobile industry, and the way what happened in the 80s, they had long-term stagnation until they invested in the technology. I think what Martin would say, you invest in the technology to change the way you produce cars and be more efficiently, and so they have changed that too. We have to be aware of what's changing in the economy. Like I said, when we have this stuff like Uber and these other places have doing different way of methods, but also incorporating new technologies. And if you maintain yourself in the old technologies, you're going to be cost prohibitive, and that's what happened a lot in Detroit. I see it a lot in agriculture. Agriculture is getting more and more productive, and new, like I said, autonomous tractors. What will that mean? If you keep on, now there will be segments that still want to grow like the old way to grow, but there are secular, there's areas that have not changed, and those that have changed, and that's what we kind of changed. That's what's showing that. And then as for us, with our growth, was basically the good times of basically 2001. You're right, we had this construction boom, but also there was something going on. Our employment increase in number of employees. I think we've changed a lot in our makeup. It was a good place to live. There was this investment boom, which was also part of it. Again, let me say this, I put that as a good times as this was the increase going on. What we have to do is use things like location quotients and shift share analysis and understand why those things occurred, what sectors. And if they figure out what sectors or what assets did, how we can improve those. I would also say, and I'd be remiss, I had to include this because remember, I'm glad Fred did this presentation the last 2 weeks. There's a fiscal, FISCAL side to this, and that the economic growth has to be linked to the fiscal of the local economies. And if the local governments cannot maintain services with this fiscal growth, it needs to be looked at also. And that's investment also in education and different things like that. I think what has happened in the long run, places, you have to be more educated. I think, UNR, UNLV are getting more in the research area, but also they're being very good in the business and other areas, SBDC and other things to help small businesses develop, which are very big. And so 2001, 2006, I guess it probably was no surprise why we got hit so hard, is because it was finance driven construction and it came down. Pardon me. But we need to take a look at underlying what other sectors, what other areas could be going in here to help us develop into a new growth path that's more sustainable. And I think we're doing that right now.
Tom, we got a couple questions from Scott Carey in your chat box. First question is, how have the state's investments in infrastructure and through aggressive tax abatements affected economic growth? And has these investments been worth it in terms of the growth they've created?
Okay. It's always a question, isn't it, Fred? As investments go a whole different ways. Education, streets. I always talk, a guy once talked, I thought was very good. One of the best investments ever made was interstate highways. It was fought by a lot of people, but they're made. It made a new business called just-in-time inventory and made one of the most profitable businesses ever called Walmart, because we can deliver, and local retails do not have to have so much inventory they used to because they can have just-in-time. That's where investments like that, that can help grow the economy, make it more efficient and those kinds. And so as we do that, I like to see more efficiency, especially with this broadband. That has got to increase. I was teaching in the last part of the spring semester. There's students I teach agriculture, so there's students in Ely. Forget it. You get 5 megabytes in Lincoln. Those areas can really grow if they have those necessary investments. Tax abatements are always hard to estimate because they're always when the growth and then combine. Hopefully what they have done is set us on a new growth path. I must admit that during before Tesla, I mean, it was that picture in 1976 of Seattle when Boeing was going under, and then it rose. The last person out of Seattle, please turn out the lights. It was pretty bleak here. I was with, they were talking about closing the College of Ag. This may be happening again. They were talking about closing a lot of universities. I mean, you go to the University of Akron, they have 11 schools. They have closed 4 of them. And so if we can have something that can put us on a new growth path, that's to be looked at. I think the investments we'll be looking at through time, But I think what they're bringing in is ancillary industries, even in Story County. And like I said, the lithium that's being built in mining in Humboldt County and in Esmeralda would not be there as part of the chain if it wasn't for this. So it's a matter of time. And our tax situation is always something to be investigated, I always say that we as economists, impact models, do not do the physical model with it. And if you look at the physical model, the impact models, I know Restrepo on them, here's start, here's the end. Well, that's like me teaching my ag students the alfalfa budget, January, December. In between, there's a cash flow that goes up and down, up and down. That's what we're having now, up and downs. And we need to be cognizant of this cash flow and difference in times that will happen when you have economic development. You build houses, you got to get permission to build a house, then you build a house, then you value the house, and then you get your taxes. That's almost like a cash flow problem to me that we need to be telling people that can happen. I don't know if I answered that. I hope I did.
I think we have just a minute or two left. Is there one more question for Tom? Aster? You're gonna...
Okay, now you hear it. The most important things is we have discussed, Tom, working on proposal, the e-connectivity in rural region. And that must be the focus now more than before, because not only helping the school or the healthcare professional to use the broadband or different type of the 5G connectivity, but also it helps to develop skill and to bring small businesses to open in different area. Example, Story County, because the revenue from Story County go to the Washoe County with the leakage of resources there, revenues there. So this is the right time, because of this shock, we can focus to design a rural e-connectivity strategy that is holistic and help the region to grow. The one is, you said, like return to a long return, a growth.
Yeah.
So
Yes, I agree with it. It's I don't know, I answered this also. Melissa has a question here on too about COVID. COVID's changed the way we do things. Teaching online, we had it for many years. Never was really pushed to do it. Now we can do it. And it's become very popular, and it's going to be learned how to do things. Retail has done this. Everybody has incorporated this with the COVID, and what it is, if you can work with computers and you have access to internet, there you go. You have this new ability to do things that I think is going to grow and grow. Teaching our university systems, why you got all this brick and mortar? There's going to be things. I teach extension. Sometimes when Fred and I are out in rural areas, sometimes people drive 3 hours for a 1 hour meeting. Maybe it could be better done this way. And so we're going to get more and more of that. As to COVID and California, yeah, it's people, how we can teach people, there's restrictions and some of how they're going to be come out. Well, we're going to be governed a lot with this disease and see how it does. But Nevada, with its abilities to, hopefully with the internet and other things, can also get some of the people from California to come over here. I think people are moving. They are moving over here. Cost of living's less, but also it's the COVID. It's going to change the way casinos are doing business. Fred, when people I had a heart valve replacement 5 years ago. I just had my 5-year checkup, and when I went to the hospital, they gave me a scan. When it's 120 degrees in Las Vegas, how the heck you know if you got a fever or not? But anyways, things like that, they're going to have to work out. You can only sit so many, or retail. But if you look at the retail people, they've become very much they've expanded the way they do things. They just pick things up at the curbside, or you go in, and I think it's going to be next 3 weeks is going to be very interesting. We've had openings of Memorial Day. Mother's Day, protests. If there's no big spikes, then there's going to be some people going to talk about that too. But as for growth coming our way out of California, yeah, people come. We have abilities and with going new businesses, and it's just part of the migration of going to different areas. And as we have better, I think infrastructures will be able to attract more of those people.
It's after 1 o'clock, so we've hit our hour for the day. First and foremost, I want to thank Dr. Tom Harris for being able to pitch hit and jump in place of RTC and the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority. They were scheduled to present today, but they had a scheduling conflict. So Dr. Harris was gracious enough to pop in and talk with us today. Again, as a reminder, the presentation from May 27th and that brown bag will be posted on the chapter's YouTube channel later today. And this presentation that's been recorded will also be posted on the chapter's YouTube channel probably within the next week or so. And in 2 weeks, on Wednesday, June 24th, from 1 p.m. to, or from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., that's when we'll have the RTC of Washoe County and the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority present. So mark your calendars, additional information coming out on those meetings. Again, thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much to everyone who have taken this time to join us. If you do have additional questions for Dr. Harris, please feel free to send them to me. My email is fred, F-R-E-D, @unr.edu, and I would be happy to forward those questions on to Tom and have Tom respond directly. So thanks again very much for all your hard work and participation in today's online brown bag. I hope that all of you have a great rest of your week, and as usual, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.